Dave and I were due to be talking at a conference in Dallas this week, which unfortunately was postponed due to the coronavirus outbreak. So we thought we'd give you a little bit of an insight into things we were talking about, predominantly around the secure remote working concept and how David's team can facilitate that. David, if we just start with a bit of an overview about the secure remote worker product, what it can do and how we would use it, can you give the audience a bit of an overview?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, secure remote worker, it's kind of unique in the industry. It's actually a software-only solution that will convert a home worker's personal device into a secure thin client. So, traditionally you might have hardware or things being shipped out, but this will actually allow us just temporarily to convert that personal device. So
you've got a place you can trust it from again, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's traditionally IT organisations send out hardware that they trust, whereas they cannot trust a personal device. So this allows us to do that so we can use the personal device, convert it, which gives the IT teams that trust.
Okay. Absolutely. And what's a traditional deployment look for you? You're in call centres or you're in BPO environments. What's a normal deployment of secure remote work?
Yeah, so business processes outsourcing BPOs are kind of our traditional deployment at the moment. Okay. They have at work home programs, so agents that are 100% home working, and before secure remote worker, these BPOs would be traditionally sending out hardware and logistics. So
you remove the need for the additional hardware completely?
Absolutely. So all that home worker needs is their personal PC. Okay. So now all the BPO does is give them a link to download a piece of software. The software will connect back to a centralized management platform and deploy a set of policies that particular BPO needs on the personal device. The personal device is evaluated, and if the personal device meets those requirements, they're allowed to come in and
kind of back to base.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that's really important about this type of technology is it makes that decision quite simple from a risk perspective. So we can deploy an agent, we can evaluate a device. If we get a green flag that we can push policy to it and secure it for whatever our needs are, we can then allow it to connect back to base, or we give the IT decision maker this is really unsecurable because it's legacy software or it's already compromised potentially, which is still beneficial. If they suddenly find they've got a lot of agents that might have a pre-compromised device, they can potentially help somebody out with their own home security, which is beneficial from an employment perspective. Yeah. So, given we are where we are, we were due to be in Dallas and we're still in sunny United Kingdom. We're in a kind of pandemic planning situation. Rather than just kind of talk about COVID-19, I mean, this is an instance of something that could happen in future, or we could just have businesses that suffer continuity issues where perhaps moving them to the traditional centralized off-site BCM type location now appears to be the wrong thing to do. This seems to be a sweet spot for secure remote workers. So how would you go about helping the decision makers in this situation?
Yeah, so I mean, as you say, we see a lot of companies that are doing disaster recovery planning, and they'll have office buildings full of empty floors and PCs ready just in case they need to get their work.
That's almost the worst thing you could do right now.
Yeah, so, absolutely, and so they're still in the position where they need the office space, but the people are being told not to come to the office and stay at home. So yeah, from our point of view, from our traditional BPO type deployment, it's actually no different. It's providing those workers have a personal PC. They can simply download a bit of software from the web and turn that personal PC into the device they need it to be to do the work from home. And when they're finished,
you can roll it back,
and it's back to a personal device. So yeah, whether it's a BPO at worker or anyone else wanting to work at home, it's
so do you think this could be the new usual for you, a new kind of category of remote worker, just someone who's either having to self-isolate, or that just becomes a new norm when people are planning BCM? I know most of the original audience are probably remote workers and thinking about resilience. Suddenly this gives you a new business continuity risk assessment. Yep. So we're looking at the traditional model, which would be have legacy buildings, have them stood up, all the infrastructure is ready to go. And now we're being told that people should potentially self-isolate, And looking at that for the future, if people have not planned for that kind of outcome, they're presumably not going to be ready to deploy anything at this point. How quickly can secure remote worker be deployed and be leveraged?
Yeah, I mean that's actually one of the other benefits, because it is just a software download. I mean, depending on the spec and the speed of the machine, but a couple of minutes, it's actually that quick.
It's really quick.
It is a download, it's an install, it's a very quick evaluation, and there might be that first time there might be some remedial work that the person needs to do on their personal PC, but that's very dependent.
Yeah.
Like I say, I mean, traditional planned deployments, we have additional tools that can do pre-evaluation of the device.
Yeah, and you'd then be able to plan the remediation work and give an IT department that kind of.
It's even and it's more. We try and do it in a self-help manner as well.
Okay.
So the actual tool will, in very plain speak, give our home user the ability to self-diagnose and self-heal their own machine, whether it's simple step-by-step. Follow this, click here, do this.
Oh, that's cool.
So by the time they want to come to work, they're very quick and up and running straight away.
Okay, so I know when you originally came to Coalfire, the view was to look at how secure remote worker could be used to secure an endpoint, mainly for PCIDSS purposes.
Yep.
So I know our lab team, we took 2 or 3 iterations of the product right back to its early incarnations, and we did the hardening testing against it. We made sure it could meet the compliance requirements, and it would really lock down an endpoint so that it could be considered compliant against PCIDSS.
Yes.
Do you think there's a concern that when people are suddenly forced to do business continuity management in a rush, that they start to lower the bar from a security perspective, when really there are products on the market like Secure Remote Worker that mean you don't have to do that?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, you see it all the time. They have companies with high security might not even allow home working because they just deem it from a security point too risky.
Manage it.
But a pandemic breaks out and suddenly remote working's forced on an organisation, or they potentially go bust. You do see that security bar having to be lowered.
Yeah, and they've not had the time to think about it. They may not be aware of the products, or they've just been so inherently opposed to doing it that they've not got a tool bag ready to go.
Yes. Or I mean, the other scenario is you do have home working, but home working is restricted to a set of users that perhaps don't have access to certain information, sensitive data, and actually then they have to open that up to others that potentially do have access to that.
Because that's probably the norm in a lot of cases. It's the traditional knowledge worker, your executives, your kind of field-based staff.
Yeah.
The remote working's a known solution typically for them, but it's well planned, it's well thought out, and typically it would meet your kind of traditional deployment. But we're now in a position where your line of business staff, people are using the tools that they have every single day to engage with customers, and now being told you can't come into the office where all telephony infrastructure might be, where the compute infrastructure is going to be, and we need to isolate you, or we need to put you somewhere where all of that infrastructure is not available. Secure Remote Worker feels like it's got at least the toolkit ready to support those kind of stuff in a way that perhaps they haven't been thought about before.
And you mentioned obviously PCIDSS. There's a lot of the security features of the product were built around the standards to allow that, but it really does apply for any type of home work. They may not be entering credit card details from home, but at the same time you don't want anything they're doing being leaked out. So data leakage is
GDPR to worry about as well.
Absolutely.
People's PII data is always going to be a concern. For the audience who we're not going to see this week, what would your 2 or 3 main takeaways be when they're considering how to secure their remote workforce?
So, I mean, it's speed of deployment is key. Never lowering that security bar. There are technologies out there now that will allow people to work from home without having to ship hardware out. It's still quite a new concept, but you don't need to compromise on security, but at the same time you can have a secure home working environment with a logistics free deployment of.
And I think that was one of the things we thought was quite interesting about the product compared with some of the competition in the endpoint management space is it's relatively uninvasive. So as a home user who suddenly has their computer taken over by the corporate policies, at the weekend you can roll it back and say, right, you get your endpoint back, and then when we need to push the policies out again, they can redeploy the tool. And if they've done something silly at the weekend that's compromised the machine, the alert goes back to IT and we can kind of
That's right.
remediate.
And that was key. You know, we were very conscious that these weren't corporate devices. This wasn't our software going on a corporate image. This was our software going on a personal device. So whilst they're not at work, whilst the software is installed on the device, it cannot have any impact. You know, you can't have those security policies applied restricting them doing what they would normally do over a weekend. They can only be active when they're at work. Yeah, and as you say, if they have done something over the weekend that alters that machine, it will get reevaluated on the Monday, which may or may not let them in depending on what they did.
Doesn't let them back
over
to
the
work.
Weekend. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that's been a useful takeaway. I'm happy to talk more about secure remote worker in the future, and we'll hopefully speak to you all at the next one.